The sun rises over Iowa, casting long shadows across endless fields of corn. The golden light washes over the land, illuminating a landscape that has fed generations and shaped the very identity of America's heartland. What should be a portrait of prosperity is now one of quiet desperation. Once bustling farmhouses now stand empty, their windows reflecting the uncertainty of the times. The silence in these fields is the sound of a dream dying. The wind rustles through the crops, but there are no voices, no laughter, only the echo of what used to be. Farmers, once proud of their record-breaking harvests, now face dread. Their faces are etched with worry, their eyes searching the horizon for hope that never seems to come. Their abundance, once a promise of security, now threatens ruin. Mountains of unsold corn stand as a stark reminder that hard work alone is no longer enough. The crisis didn't arrive suddenly, it crept in, fueled by decisions made far from these fields. Policies and market shifts, crafted in distant boardrooms and government offices, have rippled outwards, changing the fate of entire communities. For years, farmers were told to plant more, to innovate, to feed the world. They embraced new technologies, expanded their operations, and put their faith in the promise of progress. They invested, believed, and worked harder than ever. Early mornings and late nights became routine as families poured everything they had into the land. Now, the system has turned on them, leaving them stranded with nowhere to sell. The infrastructure that once supported them now seems indifferent, even hostile. Local diners, once lively with talk of markets, are now hushed with worry. Conversations are replaced by silence as uncertainty seeps into every corner of rural life. Every overflowing grain silo is a monument to a catastrophic miscalculation. The bounty that should have brought prosperity now threatens to bury the very people who produced it. The paradox: farmers did their job too well, producing a bounty so large it's become worthless. The fruits of their labor, once celebrated, are now a source of anxiety and regret. This is more than an economic downturn, it's an existential crisis for a way of life. The pain is not just financial but deeply personal, threatening the very fabric of rural communities. These aren't just businesses, they're family legacies rooted in the soil. Generations have worked these fields, passing down knowledge, values, and hope for the future. To lose the farm is to lose a part of oneself, a connection to past and future. It's a loss that ripples through families, through time, and through the land itself. As combines sit idle and grain piles up, one question hangs in the air: how did it come to this? The answer is as complex as the land itself, woven from hope, hard work, and heartbreak. The roots of this disaster trace back to the bold proclamations of a trade war, echoing through the halls of power and across the headlines of the world. President Trump's tariffs on China were meant to protect American interests, promising to bring jobs back and level the playing field for U.S. industries. But for heartland farmers, those promises soured quickly, as uncertainty crept into their daily lives and the future of their livelihoods hung in the balance. When Washington imposed tariffs, Beijing retaliated, targeting American agriculture with precision, knowing it would strike at the core of rural America. Corn, once a staple of U.S.-China trade and a symbol of American abundance, was suddenly blacklisted, its future uncertain. In January 2025, China halted all new purchases of U.S. corn, sending shockwaves through the agricultural sector. The shockwave was immediate. A market that consumed billions of bushels vanished overnight, leaving exporters and farmers scrambling for answers. Prices plummeted, contracts were canceled, and supply chains seized up. The ripple effects reached far beyond the farm, touching rural banks, equipment dealers, and entire communities. Farmers who had counted on China were left with unsellable inventory, their grain bins overflowing and their hopes dashed. The trade war, once distant, had arrived at their doorsteps, turning policy debates into personal crises. Government subsidies followed, but they were too little, too late. The checks offered some relief, but not enough to restore confidence or erase mounting debts. The payments couldn't replace the certainty of a long-term market, or mend broken trust between farmers and their international buyers. For many, the subsidies felt like a bandage on a gaping wound, a temporary fix for a problem that threatened their way of life. Farmers hadn't asked for a handout, they'd asked for a market, a fair chance to sell what they grew and support their families. What they received was a check from the same government whose actions had closed their biggest customer, leaving them to pick up the pieces. The cost of policy was paid in the heartland, where the echoes of the trade war still linger in empty fields and uncertain futures. As if losing China wasn't enough, a new battle began at home. The Trump administration launched the Make America Healthy Again campaign, targeting high-fructose corn syrup. Suddenly, corn was painted as a public health villain. President Trump called on companies to abandon HFCS for cane sugar, and the message spread fast. Food giants began reformulating products, proudly advertising HFCS-free labels. For corn farmers, it was a devastating blow, another major market evaporating. Maria Sanchez in Illinois had invested in corn syrup and ethanol, believing they were safe bets. But the campaign against HFCS showed even domestic markets could vanish overnight. Farmers now fought a war on two fronts, with markets collapsing abroad and at home. Nature delivered a historic harvest in autumn 2025, record-breaking yields across the Midwest. Fields stretched endlessly, painted in gold as combines worked day and night to bring in the bounty. The air was thick with the scent of fresh corn, and the landscape shimmered with promise. In any other year, this would be cause for celebration. Communities would gather for harvest festivals, and families would toast to a season of hard work rewarded. But with China gone from the market and domestic demand shrinking, the surplus became a disaster. The world's largest buyer had vanished, leaving mountains of corn with nowhere to go. The law of supply and demand hit hard. Prices collapsed to historic lows. News headlines blared warnings, and digital price boards flashed red, signaling trouble for every farmer. Farmers faced prices below their cost of production. Every truckload was a net loss. The math was brutal. No matter how much they harvested, the numbers just didn't add up. Silos filled, then grain was piled in massive tarp-covered mountains. Storage facilities strained under the weight, and still the corn kept coming. These golden mounds became symbols of the crisis, billions in lost revenue. What once represented prosperity now stood as a stark reminder of loss. The psychological toll was immense, so much abundance rendered worthless. Farmers who had poured their lives into the land now faced uncertainty and heartbreak. Loans came due with no income to cover them. The threat of foreclosure loomed, and the stress rippled through families and entire communities. The record harvest instead of a windfall became a crushing liability. Each kernel, once a symbol of hope, now weighed heavy on every farmer's mind. Farmers faced impossible choices: sell at a loss or pay to store grain, hoping for a miracle. Conversations around kitchen tables grew tense as families searched for answers. The flood of golden grain threatened to drown them all, turning triumph into tragedy, and leaving the heartland searching for a way forward. In Iowa, John, a third-generation farmer, walks through his silent machine shed. His combine sits idle, a symbol of broken promises. Once a staunch supporter of the trade war, John now faces foreclosure. "We were told to be patriots," he says, "but it feels like we were sacrificed. The numbers don't add up, costs outweigh any hope of profit." In Illinois, Maria Sanchez surveys her quiet processing facility. She invested in ethanol and corn syrup, betting on domestic stability. The government's campaign against HFCS pulled the rug out from under her. "We built our operation on trust and long-term relationships," she says, but it all unraveled in months. The crisis isn't just about prices, it's the collapse of an entire ecosystem. The market, Maria notes, has a very short memory. While American farmers drown in surplus, Canada thrives. As the US trade war pushed China away, Ottawa seized the opportunity. Canadian diplomats secured long-term supply contracts with Beijing. For Canadian farmers like Pierre, it's a golden age, expanding operations, buying new land, paying off debts. "The Americans shot themselves in the foot," Pierre says. "For us, it's the opportunity of a lifetime." The contrast is stark. Markets US farmers built are now enriching their competitors. Experts warn these markets may be lost for good. China is investing in Canadian infrastructure and long-term relationships. The US is seen as unreliable. Canada's reputation rises. The prosperity that should have flowed to Iowa and Illinois now enriches Ontario and Manitoba. New tractors and expanded farms appear north of the border. For American farmers, it's the bitterest irony of all. The crisis of 2025 is carving deep, painful scars into the American landscape, reshaping lives and livelihoods. The nation's identity as the world's breadbasket is now in serious jeopardy, more than ever before. Competitors like Canada and Brazil are rapidly taking the lead, filling the void left behind. The long-term consequences threaten America's global standing for decades and perhaps even longer. Young people are leaving rural communities, seeking stability and opportunity elsewhere. The hollowing out of the heartland may become a permanent reality for many. Farming organizations plead for relief, but Washington moves slowly, weighed down by bureaucracy. Aid feels inadequate, a temporary fix for a deep structural problem that persists. Farmers wait, watching the sky, the markets, and the roads for hope that may never return to them. The great American farm stands on a precipice, its future more uncertain than ever before.